if I'm audible, if you guys can hear me properly. You can just drop a thumbs up. Yeah, okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, I'll just share my screen as well. I'll just need a confirmation after that as well if you can see my screen or not. Yeah, can you see the screen as well? Okay, awesome, fine. So this is a little different from what we usually do here at DSC. It's in this meet. But yeah, so what is the advantage? I'll just get to that, right? Because when we say that, I can keep my code to myself, the advantage is that, my code will be proprietary and you can profit off of it because somebody else can't build the same software that I built. But what's the advantage of me making this code open source? That is, I make this code publicly available for any developer across the world to access. The advantage with that is the fact that, any developer, see, each developer does not think alike, right? If I built a particular feature in my software, it, I could have, some idea could not have crossed my mind that crossed your mind. So if the code is publicly available, you can contribute to my code, right? That is one advantage. Or say some kind of loophole is found in my code, some kind of, security exploit or something like that is found in my software. As a developer, if you look at it, since the code is publicly available, you can contribute to fix that. So these are some advantages. So let's just get into it. Let's try and understand what open source is. As I mentioned, it's when your code is freely available. Any developer across the world to use, modify, and distribute it. Okay. Now, let's look at some examples. So I think most of us here have used VLC Media Player. A more common example is, I think most of us here have an Android phone. Some might have iOS, but most of us here have an Android phone. So the Android project is an open source project. So if you have a Samsung phone, you will have something called One UI. So this One UI is built on top of Android. So they took this open source Android and they built on top of it, right? Even say, for example, if you use the Chrome browser, the Chrome browser is built on top of the Chromium project. The Chromium project is an open source project. Same goes with the Brave browser. If you're using the Brave browser, that's also built on top of the Chromium project, right? So these are all examples of open source software on top of which other bigger software have been built. So that should kind of, give you an idea as to why open source software and open source projects in general are so extremely useful. Okay. So let's get into why open source exists. So we kind of got an idea when I told about the Chromium project, Chrome being built on top of it, One UI being built on top of Android. So what is the advantage? One is that you can solve problems together. So if it's a open source maintained project, as I mentioned earlier, say you find a loophole, say you find some bug in the code, it can be patched quicker because there are so many developers across the world looking at that code base. You can build stuff faster. Yeah, you can build more features faster. It's thousands of developers contributing at the same time. And yeah, it makes knowledge free. So as I said, the Brave browser, for example, it was built on top of the Chromium project. Without the Chromium project, the Brave browser would never exist, right? So you're making the knowledge free. And yeah, you can also look smart on LinkedIn that you built the code, you built that project on your own. Let's clear up a few myths. If you've kind of gotten your feet wet with open source in general, you would have noticed that people say that open source means it's insecure because the notion is that, oh, if the code is publicly available, people can take advantage of it. People will find loopholes in it. The whole point of open source is the fact that if your code is available online publicly, people find the loopholes faster and it is patched faster, right? So open source means insecure is actually it's quite the opposite. Open source means it's very secure because you can also make sure that some corporate that is running that software is not stealing your data because the code is all there for you publicly available. Okay. The other one is that it's only for professionals. That only professionals can make open source contributions. I'll show you how simple it is to make open source contributions in another 5 minutes, right? And I'll show you the fact that it is not only for pros. Anybody can make open source contributions. Okay. Now, why? Why should you contribute? Because when you are an open source contributor, you don't get paid, right? You're contributing to publicly available software. The software you're contributing to also doesn't make money. So why contribute? Now let's take an example. Say you're trying to learn a skill, right? Say you're trying to figure out how to build websites. You're learning HTML, for example, right? Now, when you're learning HTML, the best way to get better at it is you get hands-on, you build a project on your own, you code a website out yourself, right? Now, what happens is, say there is already an existing website somewhere, right? You want to contribute to some website, uh, they're open source, their code is open source. Now, when you go into their code base, when you find the issue, when you contribute to it yourself, you're essentially working on real world projects. You're getting a much better hands-on experience. So that obviously helps you learn faster. It helps you build a stronger portfolio. Yeah. So we'll get into things like Hacktoberfest and Girl Script Summer of Code, and also a little bit of GSOC as well further in this session today. And you'll kind of understand why having these open source contributions. So just for the people who don't know, when you make a contribution to some open source project, it is permanently known that this particular contribution was made by this particular person. It's accredited to you. Okay. So when you have it on your profile that you made so and so open source contribution, it's very big for recruiters. Say you want to join some company, you tell them that you've made so and so open source contribution. It really stands out in your CV. Okay, so that's one of the other things. So when we also get into this whole Hacktoberfest Girl Script Summer of Code, you'll realize that you'll work with lots of other contributors side by side, right? So it kind of helps you build connections. You'll make a lot of friends, a lot of peers who kind of share the same interest in building software, writing good code. That's kind of also the point, right? College clubs that we have over here in the college, that you want to be with like-minded individuals. And when you're with like-minded individuals, you're actually more motivated to write code. So that is one of the things. Get free mentorship. Yeah, that is one more thing. See, now in these programs like Girl Script Summer of Code and Hacktoberfest, which again we'll get more in depth into moving forward, you'll be assigned mentors who will kind of help you make these open source contributions. So you'll not only learn from your peers, you'll also learn from experienced individuals, right? So yeah, community recognition, as I mentioned, when you make a contribution, it's there on your profile. It's known that who made a particular contribution. So what are the types of contribution? One that you can obviously code new features, right? Say you got a new feature idea for some software, you can code it out and you can contribute. Or say you found a bug, you can fix that bug. That's also a contribution. Now, I want to kind of go over the fact that earlier we had a myth, right, that only pros do open source contributions. So not really the case. I'll tell you one thing. When we said that code is publicly available for any developer across the world to access, right? The most important thing is when I write code and when I publish it, any developer across the world should be able to read my code. Okay. There is no point if the second person can't even read your code and understand what it does. So a very good practice that we do when we write code is that we document it. We write what one particular line of code does. What's the logic behind that code? Why did we, what were we thinking when we wrote that particular line of code, right? So, if you can just document undocumented code as well, that is also open source contribution. Okay. And yeah, you can also, I'll show you what a PR is, a pull request is. Reviewing these pull requests and all of that, that's also types of contributions. Okay. Now, before we get into this, I kind of want to show you guys how to find these open source programs. So let's do one thing. Let me share this window. So you can see my browser window now, and I'll go on Google and I'll just show you how we can kind of find these open source code, freely available code. Okay. So I'll quickly look up. So for example, I took the example of Android, right? So let's look up Android GitHub. Yeah. Now, in case there are people who don't know what GitHub is, I'll just clarify this for you. All along, we were talking about the fact that we can publish our code, correct? Publicly. Now, where do I publish this code? I can publish this code on Git platforms such as GitHub and GitLab. Okay. on these platforms I can view these publicly posted codes. So before I move into this, if you guys have any questions, let's take them as well. You can leave it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and then unmute and ask the question as well. Yeah, does anyone have any questions so far? If we can move forward. Okay, fine, cool. So this is Android's GitHub. Let's take an example. How many of you use like a smartwatch? I think many of you use like a smartwatch, right? Except being for an Apple Watch, every smartwatch works on Android. There's a version of Android called Wear OS that we use on our smartphones, right? So let's go on the Wear OS repository. So I used a word called repository, right? I'll quickly give you a very brief explanation as to what a repository is. A repository is basically a public folder in which your code is stored. Okay, so I'm here in this Wear OS samples public repository. So this is the folder consisting of all the code to do with Wear OS, right? So let's go into this watch face for example. Okay, we get weather folder, and if I go into this, so this is, well, let's look into some other bigger folders. So all of this was the code used to run Wear OS. Okay, behind the scenes. I actually don't know what this does because I am not familiar with Java, but yeah. So this is I think this is Kotlin. So I don't know what this does, but yeah, this is an example of code being publicly available. So if you can understand this code, you can contribute into this and so on and so forth. And Google is not the only company that does this, right? Even Meta does this. Okay, Meta has a front library called React.js. So you can go and contribute to React.js, React Native, for example. I'll show you guys how to find issues to contribute as well, right? But this is how you find publicly available code. You can go into this, you can read this code. I'll show you how to make a contribution as well. So yeah, what is the prerequisite for this? You need to understand how GitHub works. You need to understand how Git works. To learn how Git works. If it is something you guys are interested in, you can let us know. We can do a workshop on Git and GitHub and how to kind of collaborate with your friends on projects and how to also do open source contributions on a larger scale. You can let us know. That is an event that we can do as well. We can have a poll on our Insta story. If that is something you guys are interested in, you can vote on the poll and you can let us know if you want a GitHub event. It's something we can do. But I'll show you a small sample as to how we can do an open source contribution. So I'm on GitHub right now. I'll head to my friend Vinyas's GitHub, and I'll go into his repositories. So we have a demo repository that we set up last night. Okay, so this is the repository that I'm going to make a contribution and show you. The first step is we have to fork this. Okay, I already forked it yesterday, but regardless, I'll fork it again. So I already forked this yesterday like this. What does forking mean is this repository is public was on my friend here. I created a local copy of it on my own profile. Okay. Now I can make changes to this on my own profile. I'll go into this test.py, and if you know a little bit of Python, you can tell that I've misspelled the print statement. So I'll just correct that, and I'll commit those changes. Okay. Now once I've committed those changes, I do something called a pull request. Okay. Now for the commit that I've done, in which I've changed off my code, it's only changed in my local repository, in my own folder. I wanted to change in the main folder as well. That is on my friend's profile. He is the main folder or the main repository. So I did something called a pull request. Okay. So I'll create a pull request. So I can give it a title. I can describe what changes I've exactly made. So I'll just say this, and I'll create a pull request. Now on my friend Vinyas end, he will receive this pull request, and once he accepts, so I think he'll do it in a moment. Pull request. So yeah, he's merged the pull request. Now if I go to if I go to the repository on his profile, and if I go into the file that I just changed, you'll see that the code is fixed. Okay, so this is just a very small demo. Again, we can get in depth into the GitHub event. So let us know if that's something you want. But yeah, this is general procedure that you fork a repository. That is, you create a copy. Oh, 1 second. I'll just show you guys the slides. Yeah, so the general procedure is that you fork the repository. That is, you create a local copy of the public folder on your profile. Okay, we did not really clone it. We normally do that if we are editing it on some IDE like Visual Studio Code locally on your laptop. Then you commit it and then you create a pull request. Okay. Now, how do you find issues that you have to contribute to? Okay, I'll show you that really quickly. Okay, so let me show you how to find issues. So for example, let's go to Microsoft's GitHub. Okay. On Microsoft's GitHub, let's go into any of their projects. So Visual Studio Code is one of their open source projects. So is TypeScript. So I'll head into TypeScript, for example. Okay. And over here, I have an issues tab, if you guys can see. So I'll go into this issues tab. And over here, you can see kind of, so I can go to this labels over here, right? So I can come here and I can kind of find specific issues that I want to commit to. In many of the repositories, by the way, there'll be classification in this as well. Beginner level issues, intermediate level issues, advanced level issues, and you can choose based on that. These are based on the type of bugs. So public API type issues. I can click on this and all of those will be these kind of issues. And so I can go on a particular issue and I can view the discussion. Right, I can view the discussion. A good way, actually, if you want to commit to a repository, if you want to make an open source contribution, is every repository, if you scroll down, will have a README file. And if you scroll down enough on the README file, in the documentation, you'll have a programming handbook. Actually, Meta does this better. So let me show you Meta's GitHub repository. So if I go to Meta's GitHub page, and if we go into the React repository, so this is the repository for React.js. And if I scroll down in this, in the README file itself, under documentation, you'll find something called a contributing guide. Okay, if you open this contributing guide, you have a very detailed file as to how to contribute, how to kind of find the best bugs, and what is the overall procedure for documenting your contribution. So this is some really, really useful stuff that you will find on most open source pages. You'll find a how to contribute page given by the guy who has made the repository. Fine. So this is kind of how you go about contributing and what open source contribution actually means and what open source software is. Okay. Now let's get on to the main gist of why we are here today, and let's discuss what Hacktoberfest is. Right. So I'll let Vinyas take over and he'll tell you guys a little bit about that.
So am I audible? I want you all to give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me. Right, cool. I will share my screen. So I want you guys to verify if the screen is also visible. So yeah, is my screen visible? I want you all to give me a thumbs up. All right, cool. So let's actually move on to what exactly Hacktoberfest is. So as my friend Ritvik just discussed about what open source exactly means, I'm pretty sure all of you have a decent grasp, at least, of what open source is now. So let's move on to what Hacktoberfest is. So I'm pretty sure all of you are very curious about what even is Hacktoberfest. So since majority of you are from a tech background, I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with a company called DigitalOcean. So it's a pretty massive company. It's a cloud service provider. So what a cloud service provider is it's basically just lets you host all of your applications on the cloud. So DigitalOcean is a massive company that is used by even bigger companies like GitHub itself and even Shopify. They use DigitalOcean to host their services. So what Hacktoberfest is it's basically an initiative which was started by DigitalOcean in collaboration with GitHub and GitLab. So as my friend Ritvik just discussed, GitHub and basically just a universal way for you to showcase your code, or you can also choose to make it private. So what Hacktoberfest is it's an initiative started by these, and it's basically just a month-long deep dive into open source. So it starts from October 1st and it ends on October 31st. So it's a month-long deep dive into open source where you're able to contribute to open source code, uh, get familiar with peers who are into similar interests as you are, etc., etc. So now the question arises as to who exactly is Hacktoberfest even for? Now, if we look at any open source contributions or any open source event, then the people who are contributing to open source events can be classified into majorly three categories. So these three categories being a maintainer, and a maintainer is someone who is responsible for the entire repository. This is generally someone who is quite experienced and knows the code base quite well. So the responsibility of a maintainer is to basically merge pull requests. So as Ritvik and I gave a demonstration earlier, he made a pull request and I was technically the maintainer of my own repository. So I had to merge the pull request. So the duty of a maintainer is to review the code and make sure the code that is being submitted is proper. And what exactly do you mean by proper? It could mean a lot of things. One is the fact that it should be correct, first of all. It should be bug free without any malicious code. And it should also be clean code, very readable, and it should be documented well. All of these are taken into account. And then the maintainer merges the pull request. So the other responsibility of the maintainer is to create issues. So what exactly are issues? So if I had to give you an example, think of a website where the login page does not work. That is an issue, right? So the maintainer, what he does is he creates an issue. Like there is a section called issues on GitHub. And basically what he does is he creates an issue stating that the login page does not function properly. And what happens next is the contributors who are currently working on the repository have a look at the pending issues. So a contributor will see that there is an issue which states that the login page is not working. So now what the contributor can do is he can make modifications to the login page and he can make it work. He can essentially just change the code or he can add additional code to it such that the login page is finally working again. So once the login page is working, the contributor can create a pull request. Once the pull request is created, the maintainer gets a notification saying that this particular contributor is making a pull request. Then it is the maintainer's job again to review the pull request, to check the code, to see that whether the code is actually proper. It doesn't have any bugs, it's not malicious, or it's documented properly. All of these factors are taken into consideration before the pull request is merged. That is basically what the maintainer does. It's generally someone who has a lot of experience because this guy is basically responsible for maintaining the entire repository. Now to what a contributor does, and we just discussed, a contributor is someone who is making changes to the code base. So a contributor makes changes to the code base and creates requests. And if you will follow, you will be contributors. You will be contributing to publicly available repositories. And most of you, I think, will also come under the beginner category. Beginners are basically people who have never made a pull request. You might have made a pull request before, but maybe not in a group environment or a collab environment. So if you come under the beginner category where you're not familiar with Git or GitHub, then the first thing I would suggest you do is pick up both of these skills. Useful. They come in very handy. In your entire tech journey, you will always use Git and GitHub. So that is the step for you to do, which is create a Git and a GitHub account. The next thing that you do is get familiar with one particular technology. So may it be a language like JavaScript, or as my friend Ritvik mentioned earlier, you can get very familiar with React. And React is a JavaScript framework which is it is maintained by Meta or Facebook, and it is also open source. And 80% of the front end nowadays is written in React. So if you get yourself familiar with React, then you'll have a very easy time finding projects that already use React, and then you'll be able to contribute to them. So my suggestion to any beginner is to get familiar with Git, GitHub, and any one particular technology, which I would suggest to be React. Now, I'm pretty sure all of you are wondering, how do you register for Hacktoberfest? So here's a detailed description on how you can register to Hacktoberfest. Um, so the first thing you need to do is you need to sign up with your Git provider. And your Git provider is basically GitHub or GitLab, as mentioned earlier. And it's also important to know that you cannot register without having a GitHub or a GitLab account. So the first step for all of you to do is create a GitHub account. So then they're going to ask you to answer a few questions, and you're going to have to complete the registration by answering all these questions. And these are pretty rudimentary questions, like what is your age, where is your country of origin, etc. Then the other thing to keep into account is basically that contributions are counted only between October 1st and 31st. Now, what this means is, what PRs and MRs mean is basically PR stands for pull request and MR stands for merge request. So a pull request is basically just made when you create changes in uh, your local fork, and then you create a pull request which can be merged with the main branch. And a merge request is basically when you create a separate branch, you make changes in that branch. If you want to merge the separate branch with the main branch, you create a merge request. Both of them are quite similar and they have very similar use cases. So I don't think you need to know the nuance between them. And as my friend Ritvik said earlier, we can have a complete Git and GitHub session also later if you guys want us to have one. And basically, what this line means is that any contribution you make before October or after October will not be counted, or they won't be counted to your overall aggregate for Hacktoberfest. So, for example, all the repositories are publicly available right now that are present on Hacktoberfest. You can make contributions to them as we speak, but they just won't be counted in Hacktoberfest because that only starts from October 1st. And if you're wondering when you can register to Hacktoberfest, it's basically anytime between now and October 31st. It's October 1st. That's also the day that Hacktoberfest ends. So there's no point in registering on the last day. What I would suggest you do is you at least register before October 1st. So what you can do is you can create your account right when Hacktoberfest starts. So at least you're present for the starting or the inaugural ceremony of Hacktoberfest. Once you have all of this set up, you need to find projects that you want to help. So like I said, you will find a lot of projects that are using React. So if you want to contribute to any of those projects, then you just have to search for them, look for the issues that are created, then solve those issues. And yeah, so one thing to note about Hacktoberfest is almost everything is automated. So once your PR or once your pull request or your merge request passes all the automated checks, it enters a 7-day review window, after which it will be merged. So you will get a notification saying it's been merged after 7-day window, or it will happen earlier also, but at the most it'll take 7 days for you to get your uh, notification saying that it's merged. Then here it's just a suggestion for all of you to aim for 6 pull requests or merge requests to get accepted, in which you can upgrade your digital badge. It's also known as a holopin badge. So you can get all these cool badges that you can add to your GitHub as it's like a flex. It's a showcase of what and all you've done. Now let's move on to another open source event that my friend Ritvik kept mentioning. It's Girl Script Summer of Code. Now, as the name might misleadingly suggest, it's only for girls. It's called Girl Script Summer of Code because it started from the Girl Script Foundation, which is the organizers of this event, similar to how DigitalOcean was the organizer for Hacktoberfest. So, how you can get registered for Girl Script Summer of Code is firstly, a Girl Script Summer of Code starts from next year around February. It's quite a ways off. And this year's Girl Script Summer of Code is already ongoing. So you won't be able to register for it right like Hacktoberfest, but this is just for your future reference. So first have to go to the Girl Script Summer website, and they're going to ask you to download an application known as the Insights app. So you'll be able to download it for iOS or Android. And then you have to choose your role. And your role is basically whether you want to become a contributor, a mentor, a project admin, or a campus ambassador. Then they're going to ask you to fill a form with all of your details, like your name, your email, etc., etc. Then you just submit the form and you wait for your selection results. Now we will go over this once again once everything is done. And there is one more very important thing that I want to showcase to all of you, which is the Postman API Fundamental Student Expert Certification, which is being provided by Girl Script Foundation right now. So I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with Postman. So let me show you a demo of what Postman is. So Postman is essentially just an API testing tool. So what that means is it's a client which sends API requests to your backend endpoints. And it is also an Indian startup. It's an Indian company. So as you can see here, this is where I can send API requests to my backend endpoints. So for example, localhost 88. If you're familiar with a bit of backend, you'll know what I'm talking about. And you can see how clean the user interface looks and also how simple it is for you to understand. It's very beginner friendly, and a lot of big companies also use Postman for their API tests. Suggest certification on how you can become an expert at Postman because it's a very useful tool that you will use all the time if you're doing any backend testing. So how you now let's go over to some of the websites. The first one being Hacktoberfest itself. So this is the Hacktoberfest website. It's just hacktoberfest.com. So hacktoberfest.com. This is how the website looks. And then you can register for Hacktoberfest. This is where it will ask you for authorization from your GitHub or your GitLab account. I have already authorized myself. That's why I have my profile over here. But it will ask you for authorization for your GitHub or GitLab account. I would suggest all of you make a GitHub account first. GitHub is used more widely. So all of you just make a GitHub account first, then you can get it authorized, and then you can actually start working on your Hacktoberfest project. Then you can go to the events tab. The events tab is basically where the entire timeline is. So October 1st is basically when Hacktoberfest commences. And then you have a few satellite sessions in New York. I'm not sure if any of you are in New York right now, but there's also a few in Hyderabad, Bengaluru, and Pune. So if you can visit them, you should definitely go ahead and visit them. There's one in Bengaluru in October 4th. So if you guys can visit that, then you should definitely go ahead. So that's it for Hacktoberfest. And this is Girl Script Summer of Code. So this is just Girl Script. This is the Girl Script Summer of Code website. And if you want to apply, like I mentioned earlier, you're gonna have to install the Insights app. So you can download for Android or iOS. You can go ahead with that. It also gives you instructions on what you have to do once you actually download the app. And I think we also have those instructions here. This is for Hacktoberfest. So let's move on to, yeah. So you basically download the Insights app, you log in, then you go to Explore tab and you navigate to GSOC 2025. So because GSOC has been happening every year, you're going to have like a documentation of basically every year's projects and repositories. So you're going to have to navigate to 2025. Now the registration date has already ended, so you're going to have to wait for 2026. But you basically navigate to the particular year's banner, and then you can choose your role, fill the form, submit all of your details, and then you can actually start working on the project itself. So the reason why we're discussing about Girls Trip Summer of Code and Hacktoberfest is because all of you have heard of GSOC, right? Google Summer of Code, not Girl Script, with a single S, GSOC. So GSOC is a massive open source program which is maintained by Google, and GSOC generally requires you to have a bit of experience with open source contributions already before you can start with GSOC. So Hacktoberfest and Girl Script Summer of Code can be extremely good stepping stones for you to actually get into Google Summer of Code because you need a bit of experience before you can actually start contributing to Google Summer of Code projects. So that is the reason why we had this session. It's basically for you to get familiar with Hacktoberfest and Girl Script Summer of Code as well, so that you can use it as a stepping stone, get yourself experienced, and then finally start working on Google Summer of Code projects. And Google Summer of Code is so massive that you sometimes you might get massive amounts of money just for contributing to certain code bases. You might also get a replacement offer from a company that is currently present in Google Summer of Code. So that is the final goal for all of us, is to do well in Google Summer of Code after practicing in Hacktoberfest and Girl Script Summer of Code and other open source advents. So if you guys have any doubts, Ritvik and I will be on call right now. If you have any doubts, we will be taking them. So you can put up a message or you can unmute and ask us. And we've posted the Discord server link. So if you have any doubts, you can ask us on Discord as well. And that concludes the session today. If you have any doubts, you can feel free to ask us.
Also, guys, uh, before you guys also leave the session, I'll just share a feedback form with you guys in the chat. I would highly appreciate it if you guys could fill it out and let us know how this whole thing went. For learning resources, you can also join our Discord server where we'll share a lot of stuff. There's already a lot of learning resources we've shared, but the slides of this event and all that kind of stuff, we share it on our Discord server. So you can join that as well. So make it a priority. Please join the Discord server and please let us know what you felt about this event. You can personally message any one of us, or we would highly recommend you fill the feedback form so we have it all consolidated in one place. So if you guys have any questions, please ask us. You can either ask us in the chat or you can unmute and ask us, and we are more than happy to answer your questions.
If you guys don't have any questions now, you can also join our Discord. We have a massive community there. You can feel free to ask your questions in the Discord community as well. Uh, we'll be active to answer all of your questions. So if you have any now, you can feel free to unmute or raise your hand. All right, I guess I don't think any of you have doubts. So I'm going to conclude that none of you have any doubts. If you have any, you can feel free to just put a message on Discord.
Yeah, okay. Fine, guys. We'll wrap this up in that case. Uh, you can please fill the feedback form. I'd really appreciate that. And we hope to see you again in our future events. We have events coming up as soon as next week. So we'll keep you guys in loop. If you follow our Instagram, you'll stay in loop. But yeah, thank you again, everyone, for turning up. We hope to see you again soon. Bye bye. Have a good day.
Thank you all.